guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge Bushcraft. What I'd like to talk about today is tarps. And I'm calling this one Tarp Wisdom because anytime I put the name wisdom in it, it means I'm going to try to pass on to you all I know about something. And the reason for this discussion was I was watching a video of someone that I've been, talking to. And one of the things that they did was they had taken their tarp and they'd made a shelter out of it. And they had made it so that the tarp was very low to the ground, and they took the sides and folded underneath it in like a plow point and made a floor into it and climbed into it. And they were really amazed, next couple of videos, why the tarp was now leaking. Tarps are our most versatile shelter option. With a tarp, you can camp virtually 4 seasons out of the year. All it requires is you to configure the tarp in what best suits the environment at the time. But not all tarps are created equal. In fact, the job that you're assigning the tarp really needs to be tailored to specific tarp qualities or features. Let me explain. If your consideration is weight, sil nylon and several of the others, Cuban cloth, those ultra uber light, tarps are the way to go. If you're looking for durability, sustainability, and something that's going to endure a little bit of abuse, you're definitely going to have to go either with a canvas or some form of heavy-duty weave tarp like oilcloth, because it has the thickness, the weight, and the fibers to be able to take that kind of use. Because anytime you put something on the ground and get on top of it and start rolling around and sitting and twisting, you are stressing that fiber. And because of that, it will not remain waterproof for very long. Either it'll get a hole in it, or it will wear thin, or whatever the coating is that creates the waterproof barrier will be lost. Now, I've got a couple of different tarps right here in front of me that I'd like to talk about. And since we've already touched on sil nylon, I'll bring it out first. This is my sil nylon tarp that I made. It's a 10 by 10. And as you see, it will mush down to about the size where I can stick it into a canteen carrier. Extremely light. Very thin little gossamer material that is waterproof. But what it does not do, it is not a UV blocker. Now, here in my south, 9 months out of the year, the primary use for a tarp is always going to be for keeping me dry, but also for giving me sufficient shade. Sil nylon normally does not do this very well because in the visible light that we see coming from the sun, there are all kinds of waves and particles, and they're still discovering stuff. But in a nutshell, some materials capture or block these wavelengths and some materials do not. Think of it like putting on a pair of sunglasses. You can still see through it, but it blocks the ultraviolet light. Well, sil nylon is so thin, it does not block a lot of the UV radiation or that long heat wave radiation. So if I put this up and then get underneath it for shade, it's kind of like I'm putting a pair of sunglasses over my head. It's not truly blocking the incoming UV radiation. It's blocking some of it, but not all of it. And so sitting underneath the tarp, I'm actually still going to get a lot of radiation. I'm going to be warmer. The emergency space blankets that have the reflective side on it, they are a very good tarp for reflecting the sun's radiation, and therefore they make a good shelter. It's also that quality we like in the winter because it acts as a heat reflector to reflect the heat of the fire back into our shelter. And the rubberized, aluminized I should say, coating on it makes an excellent heat reflector. And because of that, I can put the shiny side outward, sit under this tarp, and it will be cooler because it's going to block that radiation. As well as being waterproof, it's also a sunshade, and it's protecting me. This one, in one of my early videos, I did I believe it was called Slash Camp or something like that, and I went and demonstrated a real quick little overnight setup that I do. That's my basic hammock and this little tarp over the top of it, and then, you know, a couple of little accoutrements. This is actually a British Foxhole cover tarp that I picked up from Sportsman's Guide a couple of years ago. And it's a vinyl-like material. I'm not exactly sure what the component is. It's super, super thin. It's as thin as a sheet of paper. But it's very tough and very, very durable. And it's meant to be where you're going to dig a foxhole, put this over it, and then bury dirt on the top of it and pull it tight and make a, you know, a barrier up there. So it's very tough. But this material actually absorbs heat very effectively. And whenever you put this thing up in the bare sun, it is an oven underneath it. It's going the opposite of the cell nylon, and it's capturing too much of the wavelength. And so I honestly think you could wrap this around a tripod real tight and have it like a chimney effect and use it for a drying rack for meat, because it will raise the ambient temperature well above the air temperature underneath this tarp in the bare sunlight. So I don't use this very much for that very reason. It would work good in the winter to absorb that heat coming from the fire as well to reflect back to me. But the emergency space blanket reusable is actually a much better choice than this. This has kind of been regaled back to the extra gear. Now, durability. That was something we touched on a minute ago. The qualities that make your tarp waterproof is usually a coating or some sort of weave that anchors and holds the material together tightly. I heard a deer. And because of that, it can be scraped off, twisted, stressed out, rubbed off, etc. And you will lose the waterproof ability of the tarp. So it's not a good idea to ever put the tarp underneath you, unless you have no other choice, as a water barrier. It's better to carry some cheap piece of plastic, some wore out poncho, a 55-gallon drum liner, something like that is a barrier, because it's cheap and easily replaced. If you get a pinhole in it or a pretty good hole, put a piece of duct tape on it. But if we want our tarps to remain waterproof, we need to protect them, keep them off the ground, don't stress them. Now, of course, in survival situations, the tarp can be turned into a boat. I mean, you can wrap it around and make a bull boat out of it. You can use it to drag stuff with. It has lots and lots of uses. But always bear in mind that any use that causes this material to come in contact with the ground or any abrasive surface, I am probably sacrificing its water repellent ability when I do so. So don't just do it for, no reason. Make it a real good reason why you're about to ruin your tarp. Okay? Next, I picked up one of these not long ago, and this is a retired, I guess you'd call it, United States Marine Corps piece of kit. It's a tarp that they must be currently issuing, and it's camouflage digital on one side and tan on the other. This has been a really good tarp. It's relatively lightweight. It has grommets all the way around the side, so it's easy to tie, and it's bigger than a standard issue poncho, but very similar material, okay? Actually, I think it may be a grunt thicker, but not by much. But it's become my go-to tarp here lately for throwing in the pack, taking out when I'm going to do videos, or I just need to sling up a quick shade or sling up my hammock and put over the top of it. Another point that we need to talk about is the quality of the tarp. Now, these emergency space blankets come with a teeny little old grommet in the corner. Take duct tape like I've done right there and reinforce that. Sil nylon. If it does not have reinforcements in the corners, pass it by, because it will tear out. If your material is not thick and strong on its own, it needs the reinforcement, especially your Sil nylon, your Cuban fiber, and etc. Because you're asking that fiber to hold a great deal of stress. When a tarp's sitting there and it is hammering rain on top of it, wind is just blowing, there's a great deal of stress on that grommet hole. And so you need a triangular or a strip, or better yet, a big square of reinforcement to spread that load out and not let your tarp rip. The lighter, the thinner the tarp, the greater the need for these reinforcements. Now, a big old thick U.S. military canvas tarp with that rolled edge, grommet's perfectly fine, because when you look at the edge, it's almost as thick as a pencil where that edge has been rolled up. It is, in essence, reinforced. The reusable space blankets are fantastic use, fantastic value for the money. They're not very expensive, they're very forgiving, very usable. You can set them up in many different shelter configurations. They're not very heavy, and the ability to flip it around where I can reflect heat to me or flip it around so the reflection reflects heat away from me is a really, really good option in the field, especially here in my south where heat is a factor. The Sil nylons, on the other hand, are gossamer light, and so if weight is a real concern, this is definitely going to be the winner. But the weakness to it is, it is not flame resistant. I remember the joke in one of the books I read. It said, do you have a Sil nylon tarp? Here's how to find out. Lay out your 10 by 10 Sil nylon tarp. Touch a flame to the corner. Did the entire tarp burn up in less than 10 seconds? Yes, you had a Sil nylon tarp. Keep them well away from fire. Flying sparks can ruin your day real quick with a Sil nylon tarp. These heavier tarps like this military type or even a canvas tarp, if you have a conveyance, canoe, vehicle or something like that, a canvas tarp is the way to go. You'll get years and years and years of longevity out of it without having to sacrifice hardly anything. Disadvantage is weight. That big, heavy, durable material also is going to cost you the weight. So you've got to kind of weigh all the pros and cons. But in a nutshell, if weight's a factor, the little stuff. But realize it is not going to be good shade in the sun. Most are not. I've seen one or two that were. But for the most part, the material is so thin in Sil nylon and even Cuban fiber that so much radiation comes through, you might as well be sitting out in the bare sun. So kind of keep that in mind. Your size of the tarp that you need, that's up to you. I have gotten by with an 8x8. But I'm going to tell you, an 8x8 gets awful small whenever it's just bucketing down, because you got to kind of get in the center of it and you're hunched down like this trying to stay out of the wet. It's difficult to stretch out underneath it and not get close enough to the edge. You're going to get some splash coming in. I prefer a 10 by 10. If I'm going camping like rendezvousing or something like that, I have a 12 by 12 that I put up, because I can put a cot underneath that, and that's a tent. To me, a 12 by 12 is a tent. 10 by 10 is about the biggest I'd say is a tarp for me to carry as a tarp. I want my configuration to suit the weather pattern. My favorite of all time is always going to be a diamond shelter, which is sometimes called a plow point, and it's 3 points touching and anchored, one pulled up with some sort of stick or a center pull pulling out the center. It gives you a lot of headroom, plenty of room to stretch out. Put a fire in front of it, you're fine. Hey there. Champ scared the snot out of me. Hello, Champ. How you doing? You've been down to the river, haven't you? Yeah. Anyway, say hello to Champ. Okay, go on. Go on. Go on. I'll play fetch in a minute. So, to recap, what you need in your tarp configuration is somewhere of a size that fits you, probably somewhere between an 8x8 or a 10x10. The material it needs to be made out of needs to be durable and within the weight and durability that you need. If I'm doing backpacking, I need the lightness. If I'm doing camping, canoeing, and etc., I need the durability more than I need the lightness. Material that it's made out of, again, you make the decision based upon what your needs are going to be. I hope this gives you some ideas, guys. Do some online research. Go look at your YouTube videos and things on how to set up tarps. There are tons of videos on how to set up tarps, on how to do plow points and diamonds and lean-tos and all kinds of configurations. At one point I remember somebody stating, or I saw a diagram or something that said there were 70 different ways you could set up a tarp, and I believe it. It can be configured to just about anything, and it is our most versatile shelter for being in the field. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Bushcraft, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.